From the Vault is sponsored by Vita Coffee and Wine Bar in downtown Sandusky, where the elite meet to eat. Visit us in person or on the web at vitasandusky.com.
Welcome to another edition of From the Vault, leadership lessons you can bank on. I'm your host, Paul Ward. It's a pleasure to be with you from downtown Sandusky, Ohio. Yes, it's vacation land. I know many of you don't think of Ohio that way, but we're at Vita, where the elite meet to eat. Our primary sponsor and our host, Vita. Come on down and see Tom Siegel if you're in the area. Ask about his new menu. You will like it. Another sponsor is Lucky Stone Uniforms, luckystoneuniforms.com, Huron, Ohio. Today, it's a special day. I've got my old friend, Mr. Jay Lukasko. Jay is a lifelong educator, and not only that, he's a person I spent several years with, 10 to be exact, as a fellow classroom teacher. I knew Jay as a young leader, as chairman of the social studies department. And so with 31 years of education that spans a couple of leadership positions, including assistant principal, department chair, a football coach. But I think what Jay's calling card really is a top-notch professional educator in general. Jay, thanks for joining me. Good to be with you. How's it going today?
Good.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Paul, as always.
Yeah. Well, you recently retired.
Yes.
Yeah. How's that feel?
Feels good, although I think, when you retire, you kind of have this, when you spend 31 years helping people learn, and then you have a chance to retire at a fairly young age, I think there's a little bit of this internal struggle of like, do I fully embrace retirement, or do I find something else where I continue to help other people learn? Maybe there's even a little bit of guilt because I was fortunate enough to retire, and other people didn't want you to retire, and so there's kind of that conflict. So as a consequence, I'm coaching again, so I'm at least doing that. But for the most part, it's going very well.
Good.
Very well.
That response actually echoes another guest that we had on From the Vault Leadership Lessons You Can Bank On, and that's Tony Legando, who's got a few years on you, but he still says, there's a lot of information in my head. I've got a lot to give, and I want to keep doing that.
Right.
And so that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Let's go back and talk about your decision to get in education. We've got a lot of young listeners and young viewers who may be at a crossroads in their career, making some decisions. Maybe they're considering education. Talk about what advice you would give to an ambitious young potential professional educator.
Well, my reasons for getting into education, I grew up with two interests. I loved history, American history, and I loved football. So what do you do with that? You probably become some type of educator. And in college, I had the opportunity to coach. I actually coached 3 years of track, 1 year of football. I was in college. And seemed to be good at it. I think I seem to have a personality where I can identify with kids, meet them where they're at, strong work ethic, and I've always had this care for kids, where I care about their success and how they want to do. And I think that just translated into me going into education very well. My advice to a young educator is you have to be passionate about it, because I was passionate about those two areas of my life. Sometimes students would ask me, how can you be passionate about American history? I said, well, because it's the story of people. You're learning about people and the decisions they made and why they made those decisions. And you as a person, you're going to encounter major decisions in your life. And hopefully you can identify with the decisions that these people made. So you have to be passionate about your subject matter, and you have to really want your students to learn it. And you have to be willing to do what it takes to get your students to learn it. And I think that's probably the best advice that I can give a young educator, is you have to be passionate and you have to do what it takes to get your kids to learn.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership in education, starting with your early career and even maybe before as perhaps a high school student. Do you remember, whether they're teachers, coaches, or administrators, someone that gave you that one-liner or inspired you in some way that made you think, I want to be like that person? That is a path to follow.
Well, we had a coach in high school who ended up leaving. He went to Arizona and won a state championship in Arizona, but he was kind of an inspiring person to us. I had a favorite teacher in high school, was a social studies teacher. So I think those people were inspirational and made me think about what I wanted to do. I also worked for a coach at a young age that you know very well, Don Wilson, who I remember working with him, and he said, for every negative, make sure you give 2 positives. And that's a piece of advice that I kind of took throughout my teaching career. Mm-hmm. That it's easy to be negative with a kid and tell them what they're doing wrong, but make sure you get 2 positives. Whether it's in the classroom or football field, like, hey, you missed that block, but here's what you did right on that particular play, or here's what I need you to do right. So that's a phrase that has really stuck with me over the years.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, because it brings me to, I guess, invite you to expand on that a little bit insofar as what distinguishes, when I say inspiring, and that to me is the essence of leadership. So Coach Wilson gave you some advice, gave you a one-liner. What are some of the other ways that you've, at a younger age, early education career or high school, college, whatever, where I guess I'm asking how the inspirations took place? Can you boil it down into other Don Wilson-like stories?
Boy, I don't know if I have a lot of stories I could think of. You put me on a spot here.
Yeah. Well,
but I did have a coach in high school who really invested time in me, and early on in high school, I kind of had an interesting journey. I went from one of the smallest kids in the class to one of the biggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I remember getting picked on, maybe even bullied can be an overused term these days, but maybe even bullied a little bit. And I had a coach who kind of took me under his wing, and so I became an everyday weightlifter. And I worked very hard, and that kind of transformed me into a decent football player, I guess. And before I know it, by my senior year, the kids were electing me to be a captain of the team. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that experience helped me quite a bit, because in working with kids over the years, I can identify with kids from all different groups. I knew what it was like to get picked on. I also knew what it was like to perhaps be one of the more successful kids in school. Maybe fit in, I guess. And that helped me in dealing with kids in my years as teacher and as assistant principal. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's interesting about your response, right after saying, gee, you put me on the spot a little bit, I'm not sure, the next words out of your mouth hit the bullseye. You said invested time. Right. And so what I like to explore are the different aspects of leadership. There are, I think, great leaders who may not be the most eloquent, who may not give a locker room or classroom speech, but there's something about their work ethic. They're always there. They're investing the time that can inspire others in a variety of ways. So yeah, that's it. It may not be a one-liner or that sort of thing. So you go into education, you become a classroom teacher, and have taught, so 4 years as assistant principal of your 31 years, so 27 years as a classroom teacher.
Yes.
That's a pretty good career. and I know almost all of them at one school.
Correct.
Yes. So you've seen changes.
Yes.
What are some changes in students? I mean, think of year 1, 2, and 3 and year 25, 26, 27, and paint a picture for us of contrast.
Concerning the students themselves,
Yes.
there's definitely changes in terms of how kids learn. Over that time, it used to be that you could give a kid an assignment, maybe they would do it, or they would do it, they would read it, answer the questions, things like that. I've noticed in my more recent years that we almost had to return back to explicit instruction. I guess if I reflect upon my career, and I think maybe back upon my first 4 years at my alma mater, Western Reserve High School, I think my primary teaching strategy was a good old overhead notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's kind of how a lot of teachers start out. But I think even then I had a sense of, I've got to find ways to make this more relevant to the kids. I've got to find ways to get them to think about the big questions, and to get more student-centered instruction.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, there was this movement in education. So I look back on those first 4 years, a lot of lecture, overhead projector notes, but still trying to find ways to make it interesting for the kids. But then we had this push in education where we've got to find ways to keep kids engaged. We've got to keep things relevant. It was almost like this project-based movement, or maybe with the advent of technology, one-to-one technology with, MacBooks and all these things. There was kind of this movement. It almost stressed that you had to keep kids engaged and entertained. And while all that's good, I think we kind of went away from just having kids read and being able to read and critically evaluate what they were reading. Maybe that first decade of education, I felt like I had kids who could do that at the high school level. Then I think we lost that a little bit. And now there's this movement back. I know in my last few years as a teacher and as an evaluator, I wanted to see explicit instruction. I wanted to see teachers, in many cases, even at the high school level, teaching kids how to read a piece of information. What I mean by that is, hopefully the student could read. Sometimes in high school you have kids who struggle with reading. But how do you read and discern the information that you are reading? How do you understand it? How do you analyze it? How do you critique it? How do you read in such a way as to find an answer to a question that you have? So there was a movement, and I think this is good, where we're kind of getting away. I don't want to say we're getting away from the technology, because kids still need to learn the technology, but now we're getting back to more literacy-based, explicit instruction. And I kind of see that as my personal journey as a teacher. Because I think kids these days still want to learn, but they're spending a lot of time, with a lot of distractions. And so you have to find ways to get it back to explicit instruction in the classroom.
My thoughts exactly when you said the word distraction. I just think back at my time, your time as young people. Reading was maybe one of the 6 things we could do. Now they have 106 things they can do. And so while technology is a blessing to us all in terms of efficiently completing tasks, that word distraction comes in, and it's quite a lure. Let's talk a minute about your transition from an educator to an educational leader when you became assistant principal. Do you find that teachers, young teachers, were, I don't know, I don't want to go negative, but
Right.
teachers that, I want to draw a distinction between teachers that just need a little guidance and perhaps encountering a teacher, whether at your school or another school, that maybe chose the wrong profession.
Yeah. That did get tricky. Your question is tricky because a lot of young people coming out of college, going into education, becoming a teacher, they sincerely want to help kids. But some of them may have been more meant to do it than others, for lack of a better explanation. And I think that's something you got to discern. I mean, for me, fortunately, I had some experiences in college. I started college undecided, but I had some experiences where I think I could be a teacher and a coach. I was fortunate in that respect. So a lot of young teachers, when they come into a classroom, there's some things they have to realize. They have to realize that they have to have a classroom management plan and they have to follow it. They have to be prepared. They have to have clear objectives and stick to that objective for their lesson, and how they're going to meet that objective every lesson. And they have to stick to that plan. I think sometimes the biggest mistake that teachers make when they go into a classroom at a young age is they want to be the student's friend. And while there's a good to that, you have to be their teacher first. And so you have to stick to that classroom management plan. You have to stick to that lesson plan day in and day out. You have to have some backbone. When you're with a student, if that student is disruptive or defiant, you have to understand that these are your choices. This is what we're going to do today. Hopefully you'll make the correct choice. Otherwise, this could be the consequence. And I think that's the biggest thing that teachers need to learn going into the profession is I've got a plan in place. I've got to stick to it. I've got to show the kids that I care. I've got to work hard. And I'll tell you this, and I don't know if this is your question, but the most outstanding teachers are the ones who don't accept that their kids will fail. They find a way to, or at least work their hardest to find a way to reach every kid. And then that doesn't mean you dismiss the responsibility of the student. Students have responsibility for learning too, of course, and you have to have very high expectations. But your job as a teacher is to try and find a way to get that student to learn. And that's not an easy job. It's very challenging. But that's what you need to do.
Coaching football, coaching track and field, classroom teacher, passionate classroom teacher, talking about the time required to properly plan, ultimately transitioning to assistant principal role. I happen to know there's something going on in the background of all this. It's a wife, not one, not two, not three, but 4 children. What reminded me of your family is you making the statement that you have to be a teacher first before a friendship. We see that in parents, don't we? That parent who becomes permissive because they're trying to be popular. So talk about your work-home life balance a little bit through the years.
Well, they kind of feed off each other. In my 4 years as assistant principal, I kind of felt like the dad of the school because I found myself doing a lot with the students in the school that I kind of did with my kids, where you tell your kids that you love them, and there were times I would definitely tell students that I love them. Including some kids that you wanted to strangle at times as assistant principal, right?
Yeah.
But it's just kind of this, balancing love with discipline. You made a mistake here. Here's the consequences for your mistake.
Yeah.
Here's how we can learn from it and do better next time. I think your best parents do that. I think your best teachers do that. And I think your best coaches do that. And I think your best administrators do that when they meet with kids. This was a poor decision. There's a consequence for that. Okay. It could be, I'm going to have to suspend you for 3 days. But when you come back, you're going to be welcome back. It's a fresh start. I care about you. I just want you to understand that you made a big mistake here. And I may not be able to have you in this building if you make this mistake. But I want you to learn from this mistake and get better so that you can be here and be successful. So yeah, there's really a lot of crossover.
Yeah, right.
When your kids make a mistake at home, it's like, okay, it's time for a timeout, or you're grounded. Here's why. Don't do this next time. Hopefully you learn from it. I love you, you know. So there's there's a lot of crossover there. But also you have to have high expectations. You have to expect your kids to be successful as a parent, teacher, coach, administrator. You just have to expect them to be successful. And then try to show them how to be.
That's a measured, calm, loving leadership style so as a father, as a teacher, as an assistant principal, there's a common theme in those roles. And so I think you are well suited for all of them. And so where leadership is concerned, leaving home, going to classroom, leaving classroom, going to office are easy transitions. Yeah. Did you find it difficult, that last transition I mentioned, classroom to office, after 27 years?
It was, I mean, I don't know if I should say this, but for me, it was probably a mistake. You know, I probably retired early because of being an assistant principal, because it's a job that if you decide to go into it, you have to know that you're going to be dealing with a lot of the difficult things all day long. Whereas in your classroom, there's a lot of rewarding things that happen. And there's rewarding things that happen as an assistant principal too, don't get me wrong. But I was very passionate about my teaching. I think I was pretty good at it. The kids seemed to be engaged every day because, you know, I had good lessons planned and I was trying to make material relevant and all those things. But you know, there were people at the building where I worked at Vermillion who thought I'd be a good administrator, and I appreciated that, and I ended up going into administration. I probably had a chance where I could have gone for the principal job. I don't know if I'd have gotten it because I know they would have picked the best person. But I also had the chance to retire, and I just decided to retire. So the transition was difficult because I enjoyed teaching, but there's a stress to teaching. There are things you can get, you know, burnout on. You know, I was the type of person who brought work home almost every night, and that can wear on you for a while. That can wear on your family life. And so the thought of taking on a new challenge late in my career was intriguing. So I'll go into administration. I got the alternative license with administration, but then found that I really missed the classroom. But having said that, the best part of being an administrator was how you can affect the instruction in the whole building. Because I had been, I believe, a fairly successful classroom teacher, like I knew what good teaching was. And so now when you're going into classrooms, you can give advice on good teaching. And that is the best part of being an administrator. The fact that you can affect the instruction in the entire building and try to make it better and try and advise teachers on how to make it better.
It really does. I mean, your responses have been really thought-provoking to the extent that if there is a viewer or listener in the world to this, they're getting gold nuggets, not just about the world of education, but particularly the leadership aspect, not just the administrative gig you did, but leadership as a classroom teacher. One thing I've got to ask about that we haven't mentioned on, that's a really important component in the world of education, and that's communication and relationships with parents. And so speak on that a little bit, if you would, with some focus on how it may have evolved or not. What are some strategies with dealing with difficult scenarios involving parents who love their child very much and are advocating for them, including parents who aren't advocates as maybe they should be?
Communication with parents is incredibly important. And I don't know, as a younger teacher, if I realized that fully. It's something across my career that I improved on as I got older and I got better at, because it can be scary. You know, you call a parent and you're wondering what they're going to say, whether or not they're going to be mad at you or not. But communication with the parents is incredibly important. And the thing that you have to realize, whatever role you're in, and as assistant principal, I call parents constantly. That was a big part of my job. Is you have to give them their voice. Listen, even if they're saying things that you don't agree with. Be calm, be professional, and then try to explain to them why you've made the decisions that you've made as a teacher or a principal. Now, at the same time, I don't believe that a teacher or a principal should tolerate disrespect. I always had a rule in my conversations with parents where if they started swearing at me or yelling at me to the point where I could talk, where I would say, call me back when you're ready to talk in a more respectful manner, okay, or a more calm manner, and I would hang up the phone. You know, so now I don't know if I did that my first year as administrator, but I got to the point where I did that because I don't. Teachers and administrators, at least those who care, they work too hard to be disrespected. So I would tell teachers, and I learned myself, and I got advice from the bosses that I worked for who were great. The people I worked for at Vermillion High School were great. You know, they told me you don't have to tolerate that. Now, and sometimes, you know, there are times that I could have been more calm. You know, sometimes emotions do get the best of you, but you just have to reflect on that and learn from that. Maybe call the back parent later when you're more calm and have a better conversation. And what I found, yes, there are those parents out there that no matter how you talk to them or what reasons you give, they're going to be unreasonable. They just want to argue with you. But I actually found that most of my conversations, most parents are supportive, even today. And there's this kind of feeling out there that they're not, that they want what's best for their kid, and that they will support you. So just keep that in mind. We tend to reflect on the ones that drive you crazy, right? Call every day, you know, about something. But there are parents out there who still love their kids and want to be successful. So just keep that in mind when you make those. And it's very important to make those calls, to send those emails, because then you're more like a team, helping that kid be successful. So,
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Jay. From the Vault, Leadership Lessons You Can Bank On is produced by my friend Dr. A.J. Dufresne with Lake Erie TV, sponsored by Vita, where the elite meet to eat, and Lucky Stone Uniforms. I'm your host, Paul Ward. See you next time.
From the Vault is sponsored by Vita Coffee and Wine Bar in downtown Sandusky, where the elite meet to eat. Visit us in person or on the web at vitasandusky.com.
From the Vault is supported by Lucky Stone Uniforms. Go to luckystoneuniforms.com to supply uniforms for local law enforcement, fire service, EMS service, and medical agencies and organizations in North Central Ohio.
From the Vault is produced by Lake Erie TV. Watch us, like us, and follow us at lakeerie.tv.